we were talking before about that Anthony and I have known each other so long that we're like we could be like roommates or a married couple. This was something.
I want a divorce.
Welcome to the show, Jenni Gold.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to be here and see you after, God, how many, first of all, it's been years since, because we had the Film Threat office on Hollywood Boulevard in like 89, 90.
Yeah.
And that's when we first met. I think, was it then, right around then?
Probably. I moved to Los Angeles in 89, so
that
probably
there we
right
are.
around there, yeah.
Look at us. Oh my gosh. We were alive in the 80s when we were 5.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
We were very young. It was kindergarten, I believe, and film kindergarten, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We were film camp.
Yes.
Film camp. But yeah, you're one of the first people that I met in Hollywood, which was such a like hopeful thing. It's like, oh wow, there are good people in Hollywood that want to do good work and do good things. And then you start working and you realize, wow, this industry is filled with jerks. I was going to say something else, but jerks, right? Am I
Awful people everywhere.
Yeah, they're awful people in this business. But I think what you do is you gravitate towards the people that you really share your same values and you enjoy working with.
Sure, yeah.
So, you directed a film documentary called CinemAbility.
Yep.
That is making its debut at the. Is it debut at the? Just make sure that I get this right. Please correct my facts if they are incorrect. Real Abilities Film Festival?
No, not this year.
Not this year.
We did an early version of the film when we were doing a lot of test screenings, and we did a Real Abilities in New York, and we did one in Canada, and so we did a little bit of a circuit with them. But yes, Real Abilities is opening up in LA right now, but we are beyond that at this point. We're coming to the masses. We're going to the world.
Oh, that's yes. So it's now coming out in commercial release on VOD,
iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, everywhere, DVDs, Blu-rays, the works.
Now, to embarrass you a little bit, I want to just say how much I enjoyed this documentary.
Well, I love that.
Okay, well, let me do this. Let me just pour this on for a few minutes, and I know Anthony has some thoughts as well. It's such a great historical assessment of how people with disabilities have been portrayed both positively and negatively on film and television throughout the years. Starting with, I think one of the first movies, you do such a great history telling, and then sort of you're bringing up to speed with the present and how things are. But one of the first films ever made, directed by Thomas Edison, which was just a few minutes long, right, was about someone with disabilities. It was a beggar, kind of a negative portrayal, actually. Yeah. And it kind of like, it pushed a stereotype.
Started one that kind of kept persisting for a long time. Unfortunately,
yeah. But what's great about the film is not only does it give this historical telling of people with disabilities, but also looks at the positive and negative, people with disabilities who work in the industry, people who have portrayed people with disabilities on screen, and how that leads mostly to Oscar Gold, right? I mean,
sure.
But it's what I love about it's star-studded, the amazing cast or people that you got to speak on camera. I mean, Jane Seymour narrates part of it. Ben Affleck's in it.
Gary Sinise.
Gary Sinise is. I mean, it's just.
Jamie Foxx.
What's that?
Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx. That's right. Jamie Foxx, who played Ray Charles in Ray. So it's this great historical telling that, like, the footage you discovered is incredible. I mean, so I guess my first question, and Anthony, do you have anything to add that, like, because we were just like, as we were getting set up for the podcast, we were just talking about your movie. I thought we should have been recording this.
No, and it was fantastic, and I do have questions. We'll ask them further along. Yeah.
Well, my first question is, this is a documentary that's epic in nature, in the sense that it covers more than 100 years of cinema.
Yeah, such a wealth of history.
Thank you.
History, the people that you got to speak on camera. How long have you been working on this? What led to this? I mean, this is a passion project. This is something that, and I'm certain that audiences that saw it just applauded and cheered and just went nuts, because it really just it's such a hopeful message, but also just it's so epic in scale.
Well, thank you. Well, what's interesting is that once people see it, like yourself, they go nuts. They love it. Getting people to see it, because of the word documentary and the word disability, they're like, yeah, it's going to be like things we've all seen. I probably wouldn't even shy away something, because typically it's some unknown disease or someone dying. It's very depressing. But what they don't realize is that we did a film about people who love film and TV, and it's kind of a clip show, but it's also really entertaining. It has some cool history and stuff, but we tried to make it fun. So it's hard to get people to see it. Once they do, they're like crazy fans, and they won't leave the theater, and they're laughing, and it's fantastic. And I've never had that kind of reaction to any other film I've done, where afterwards they come up and they won't leave. They want to ask questions, and it's like, what have I hit? Because we basically wanted to do a thing about the power that the media has to influence society, not just for disability portrayals, although that is the thread, but also people who are different in a multitude of ways. And it took way longer than I anticipated, because I'm a narrative filmmaker by training, and I never did documentary before. This is my first. But it is sort of epic, and people have been calling it that. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. It at first I would shave off years because I was embarrassed how long it was taking. And then I met some documentary filmmakers, and they're like, no, that's a good thing. That means you stuck with it, and that's positive. I'm like, all right, it's been over 10. I still got to.
So you spent over 10 years working on this doc.
Yeah, now, it's not a full-time gig, because a lot of the celebrities, because they're so big, you had to just wait and be a small crew that could jump up and go whenever they were available and when they were available. But we had some great industry titans who, understood the mission of what we were trying to do and were willing to participate. But more than that, they were opening up. At first, some people would be a little, if it was somebody I didn't know, they might be a little bit concerned that I was trying to get them to say something politically incorrect or set a trap. And once they realized I was a filmmaker first and foremost, that I loved this business, I love Hollywood, they would relax. And then they would open up and then have self-realizations on camera. And when that happens, you're like, cha-ching, it's awesome.
Well, what I loved about the film was a lot of the actors, you just forget how many so-called disabled actors that there are working in the industry, and what a great sense of humor most of them had. All of them in the doc. It was just really eye-opening. There's the guy who he's paralyzed from the neck down, but he's got he did that web series with Bryan
Jim Troche.
Yes. With Bryan Cranston.
That was hilarious.
We have some outtakes of him that are so outrageous that, we had to cut the film. The original cut was 4 hours. We're like, okay, we bit off a lot. Originally, we were going to include advertising. We're like, okay, that's got to go.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else down the road. I don't know. But Jim, in particular, had some pieces that were just outrageous in the web series he did with Bryan Cranston. When we used to have it in the original trailer that I was using to fundraise for the film, and every time we saw it, we'd start cracking up. And some of the investors were like, again, at first they don't know if they should laugh, and we would just laugh and laugh and laugh. After the 1 billionth time, I think we don't laugh as hard as we did before, but Jim has these other outtakes that were like, we have to, put this on the web, find a way of getting people to see it, because he's so outrageous in some of the things that he said. And I think he would really appreciate, unfortunately he's passed away since then, but since we interviewed him, but I know that he's looking down from heaven and laughing every time he gets some major laughs in the film.
Well, I got to say that the movie definitely has to be a crowd pleaser, because it's one of those ones that I mean, I wish I'd seen it with an audience in a big theater.
I do too. I love it when people see it like that.
Yeah, it just, but boy, like, I mean, there are just so many things that impress me. For example, how popular films with like Lon Chaney, right? There's that movie you showed scenes from where he plays this very melodramatic film. He plays a guy who's in love with a girl who doesn't like to be touched by arms. Yeah. So the character in the movie that Lon Chaney portrays has his arms amputated so that to earn the love of this woman, and he ends up doing all these things with his feet. That's incredible. He's like eating with his feet and smoking with his feet. Playing guitar. It's like crazy, like what he'd learned to do with his legs and feet and toes. And then
she gets over her phobia.
Right, she gets over her phobia of arms, and then he's lost.
She's Joan Crawford, by the way.
What's that?
That's Joan Crawford.
Oh, wow, you're kidding! Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and yeah, she gets over her phobia, and then he has to, find a way of killing them, of course, because he's very upset.
I mean, it's very melodramatic and cheesy, but audiences at the time just ate this stuff up. They loved it. I mean, it really just shows also. I mean, Lon Chaney didn't really chop his arms off when he did that. He did not really have them amputated. But it just shows how popular that theme is. Is it that like people at least see like in disability like something where it's sort of it's an underdog story? Is that like it's portrayed that more often than not, right?
Sure.
And a movie that struck me as a kid, I saw this movie over and over, is the movie that Richard Donner made after Superman, Inside Moves.
That's his favorite movie that he's ever made, by the way.
It's my favorite Richard Donner movie, and no one knows about this movie. And what's amazing about it is John Savage plays this character who's depressed, who tries to commit suicide, fails, and ends up being kind of a cripple in it. But what's interesting is in his Superman, You'll Believe a Man Who Can Fly, he opens a window, jumps out the window, and falls nearly to his death. And then befriends a group of people at this dive bar. And one of the actors in it, is it Al Russell? I don't know if
Harold Russell. Harold
Russell.
He's the one that won the 2 Academy Awards for Best Years of Our Lives.
Right. So he has hook hands.
Yeah.
And he's in the movie, and it's this group of guys. They all have some disability of some sort, but they have like this whole. They're playing cards. They're goofing on each other. They're drinking. I just love this film, and people don't know about this movie. I'm so glad you included it.
I wanted to include it even more. I think we have some even outtakes that we're going to find a way of getting to the public, because Richard Donner, it is, according to him, one of his favorite films he ever did. Harold Russell, he won the Academy Award, but that year they thought he wasn't going to win, so they gave him an honorary one. So he's the only actor to have ever gotten 2 Academy Awards for the same role. And then he was trying to figure out what to do with his life, and his mentors in Hollywood said, you're not going to get that many roles, so you might as well have a real life. And so he left Hollywood and didn't act again. And Richard found him and wanted to send him the script. And I have this whole really great piece about Richard telling about that story, how he approached him and asked him to do it. And the guy was like, I'm not going to read it. And finally he got Harold to read it. And then he called him back and goes, okay, I'll do it if you change, the name. Don't call me Hooks, call me something else. And as long as he did that, he was like in. And he's a really great actor, but he never pursued it because there's not a lot of integration in just a character that's not about that. Just a character who happens to be the neighbor or the dentist or, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is I think when there's a disabled character and or actor, it becomes about the disability. And, I feel like there's got to be, that has to go away at some point. And I can think of very few if any, you would know better than I, films where they're just a person, right? They just happen to have the so-called disability, right? And they're just part of, they're just in the movie.
Well, right? I think Vince Gilligan did that with Walt Jr.
Right.
And when you talk to Vince about it, he knew someone, growing up and, had written a character to have CP. It wasn't, a plot point. He made him a annoying, teenage son like anybody else. And that was what was brilliant about it, and it was what made it so true. But yeah, I think that's the goal, because I started this thing after I did this movie. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bechdel test.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought, there should be one about disability portrayals. And I said, I'll start the Gold test.
Oh, that's great.
And so at first it was like, is there a character with a disability in the film or TV show that's not defined by their disability? Pretty simple. And then I started looking at films and I was like, there's nobody at all. So I have to add part one. Part one has to be, is there a character at all in the background anywhere included? Whether it's someone crossing the street in a wheelchair, or someone with a seeing eye dog, or, somebody signing, whatever. Someone on a crutch. And 9.9 times out of 10, the answer is no. They're not even included in society. Yet if you go out of here today, down Melrose, you're going to see somebody somewhere, because people with disabilities are 20% of the population. So now the Gold test has two parts. First, is there somebody? And if there is, are they portrayed in a non-stereotypical way? So hopefully it'll catch on.
I like this idea of the Gold test.
Thank you.
There should be a Gold test. But it's interesting that you also include in the film instances where, if you think about it, the character of Darth Vader is someone who, first of all, Anakin Skywalker's got some problems.
Yeah.
Anthony and I are constantly quoting exchanges between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And Anthony's Anakin in these exchanges.
I hate this so much.
But you point out that, technically he had, his arms and legs.
Sure.
Yeah,
and he was burnt.
So he's Darth Vader, arguably the greatest villain in cinema history, is a disabled character. So
he's kind of the old stereotype, though, that because of his disability, he's bitter and wants to get revenge.
He's a monster.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And I love how you go into detail about those stereotypes. Like, the disabled are it's either an inspirational story, or it's, the evil villain cackling.
I got to give full credit to the Professor Norton, who had done a class on that at the school. And when we found him, we were like, oh, that was one of the very first interviews we did. And because he's a professor, he talked for like 4 hours. We happened to be up in Boston, and I rented a room in a hotel, and I was doing another shoot, and I kept my crew, and I'm like, I just got to record this guy. And that was, he comes in and out of the film to kind of be like the professory, research guy, and he was fantastic.
He's like the cinema professor who knew all of these older films, kind of gives you the historical perspective. And I could have watched him talk. He was talking about the Angry Avenger. Right, the Angry Avenger. Yeah. But it's interesting, you mentioned the first cut was 4 hours. I'm cross my fingers. I'm hoping that there are deleted scenes that are...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good, because I feel like you could have done one of those Netflix type limited documentary series.
Call them up. I'm available. I've got the stuff.
Well, certainly you could. I've had friends of mine that are doc filmmakers that this is interesting, that they repurpose their own documentaries. So it's released as a feature here. Then they do a 50-minute version for British television. Mm-hmm. Then they do a, you know what I mean? I think that perhaps there are ways you could repurpose it in different forms, because it's such a fascinating topic. And the way that, you're right, you can't yourself, the person who the Gold test is named after, you can't name a film that passes the Gold test.
It's tough. I mean, there are some, and a lot of times they're like Ray would pass but it's based on a true story. It seems
Right.
like most of the fictional films, when people are just writing from what they've seen of someone with a disability, but not what they know, end up getting it wrong. But a lot of the biopics, because it's someone who, Ray overcame racism and a really hard time and a drug addiction problem. I mean, he was fantastic. So there are good examples. And now even on TV, you've got that show Speechless with Scott Silveri, and there's some very positive portrayals. But yet, just, what was it, a year or two ago, that movie, I don't know if you guys saw it, 'cause it's more of a chick flick, I guess, but Me Before You, it was a book.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
I didn't see it based
Basically-
on Anthony's groan.
Yeah. Well, the premise is, a guy who's good looking and rich becomes paralyzed and then wants to kill himself, even though a beautiful woman wants to marry him and, loves him.
And then, spoiler alert, he does kill himself.
Yeah. It's because the message that they're portraying is that life without full ability is not worth living.
Yeah.
That's horrific.
That's a terrible message to send.
Yeah, what happens
That's horrifying. That's a horrifying thing.
And that's like 2 years ago. I mean, really? When I started this whole process, I thought, surely as time evolved and attitudes, were more enlightened, that we'd find these old things going away.
Well, you interviewed a gentleman that became, I believe it was a quadriplegic, and he mentions in the film that after it happened, he did want to die.
Sure. That was Jim.
Yeah.
The guy who we think is so funny and had this great career later.
Sense of humor.
Yeah, he had.
And I think there is potential to explore that drama, but at the end of the day, to say you can't have a fulfilling life if you're in this condition is really irresponsible.
Well, and I think the problem I had with $1 Million Baby, by the way, it was Oscar nominated the same year Ray was Oscar nominated, and the same year the best foreign film was a film about going to kill yourself due to a disability, The Sea Inside, I think. So, and the problem I have with that is that they, in the whole first part of the movie, they portray this woman who's, economically challenged, and she's a woman, and she wants to be a fighter, and she's just tough. And she becomes, this fighter, and then when she becomes physically disabled, it's like, oh, well, I'm my character now, my persona, who I am, and the kind of person I am is gone. Yes, she would be depressed, and yes, the only thing that was given as you could get a wheelchair, you could blow through a straw, and you go to community college. That was her pep talk. And that's not such a great pep talk, but the point is, I don't think people would change quite that dramatically. Mm-hmm. Dramatically.
First of all, no, I love the term dramatically.
I think Jeff coined it.
No, that's a new word. It's a portmanteau. I love it.
Jeff started it, and now it's in my head. Thank you very much. But it's kind of cool.
I love it.
Well, a character that goes through that arc really well is Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
You see him come to terms, and at the end, he's living a great life. He's married and stuff like that. And
Well, and then you had the other. I tried to on every point. I didn't want to put my opinions into the film, so I tried to show both sides of every question. And there's a guy, Danny Murphy, who talks about, I never felt like that when I broke my back, and what people don't know is he had gone, typical story that you hear, diving accident, but it was either Bobby or Peter Farrelly was going to dive in first. They're all buddies, the three of them. And he goes, no, I'm going first. And he ran and, broke his neck. So that's how come I met Peter and Bobby, it was through Danny. But in the film, he talks about how he never felt that way,
And you have that great scene from the TV show Ironside.
Yeah.
Where it's Raymond Burr, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he's just like, all right, I'm in this situation, when can I get back to work?
I thought, I hadn't, obviously I'm too young since we met when we were in grade school, but
right, yeah.
To have seen that, and I anticipated, because we had to see a lot of things we'd never seen before, a lot of, and when we saw that, I was expecting it to be, maudlin and, ridiculous. And then his attitude, I was like, whoa, this is awesome. It was a very big surprise for the time. You have these moments of history where someone gets it right, and it's awesome because I think it makes a big impact. That show in particular, they invented, like in their heads, this wheelchair accessible vehicle for him to use. And in real life, a guy in Indiana invented it also, and their phone started ringing because people saw it on TV, and they're like, wait, I want to be able to get around. I want a wheelchair accessible vehicle.
I feel like the gold test is something that, you know what? I feel like you need to publicize this. I'll help.
I should get on Film Threat, maybe.
Well, you should. I feel like if you could write an article for Film Threat about this gold test, I think it's important because I think the only way that portrayals are going to change is if people who are disabled make more movies, or be part of the process, at least in the sense of writing, directing, more on camera. I think that's the only way that a film will pass the gold test,
right,
is with more disabled persons being involved. I mean, that's the argument for, people of color or just anything is like, look, and I have my issues with identity politics because when you get really deep into that, what you're saying is that people are incapable of empathy, that only, certain types of people should be able to tell certain stories, right. Whereas like I love watching films with female protagonists, and I can't 100% identify, but I can see that the challenges that person is going through. I feel like there needs to be that. I feel like you could lead that, and starting with this documentary, because you've made films previous to this, and you're just a director, filmmaker, right? Like in this you really are sort of, hitting it head on with the doc.
I'm hoping it's kind of a catalyst for people to think, more openly. I mean, I'm also a member of the advisory member for the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media, which, something that William H. Macy said in my film was, he didn't put anybody in his script, and it's not because he didn't mean to include someone with a disability, you just didn't think of it. And you just have to think of it. And when I was writing my the current film that I'm in post on right now, which, I don't know, should I tell them what it is? Right now?
You can. Please.
Yeah.
Please tell them.
You can tell, no one's listening. It's just...
It's, trying to enlighten the world gets tiresome after a while, and so I needed to do something fun. So I did a little horror movie about killer cockroaches that attack a college campus called Roach. And when I was writing that, we had a coroner, and I wrote it as a male. And then I was like, wait a minute, Gina will get mad at me if I don't look through the script to see if there's enough women parts. And so I was like, oh, right, why can't the coroner be a female? So we changed it. And we had a couple people with disabilities. Robert David Hall played the president of the university, It wasn't talked about that he was walking with a cane, and, it didn't matter. You just have to be open to it. And I'm hoping that CinemAbility becomes a catalyst to just open the discussion. One thing that was really fun was when I was interviewing Beau Bridges. He said back in the 60s, he used to add to his contracts that they would have people of color, and different, minorities represented in the crew and in the cast. And he goes, now you've made me think I should do it with people with disabilities because there's plenty of opportunities to work. The problem is people, because of what we've seen in media, think someone with a disability can't work. Well, certain people maybe aren't interested, can't for whatever reason, but majority of people want to be active parts of society and contribute, and they have a different perspective that just enriches the show. But when you don't have opportunities for employment, the actors who are here, the people behind the scenes who are here, like myself, you have to be either crazy enough to just keep hitting your head against the wall. In my case, I would just, I knew I wasn't going to follow the path of my peers. I was going to have to write my own material and then produce it so that I could hire myself, because I wasn't going to wait around and no one was going to hire me. So I would do it myself. And, that's one way. Hopefully it'll get easier where people will be more open. And part of that is what you see on TV and film. If you see a guy and he's the judge, or a girl is the doctor, and then you start becoming more accustomed to it. Peter Farrelly always tells this story about this joke it's like a riddle that he used to tell about, I'm going to butcher it. I should let him do it. But,
No, do it.
We'll call him on the phone.
I'll give you his number. We can call him. It's a riddle about a man and his son get in an accident. Wait, I can't do this. I totally mess it up. But they go to the hospital, and the doctor comes out and says, well, that's my son. And people would scratch their heads and go, how can that be? His dad is in the accident with him. And it was the mother. The mother was a doctor. And back in the days, nobody got it.
Oh, that's right,
Yeah,
because
I've heard
no
that
one
one.
assumed a woman could be a
Right.
doctor. Boy, how that's such antiquated, but
But he said he told it to his kids, and they got it immediately. What's his mother? What's the matter with you?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
things
that's so
do
funny.
change sometimes. But
But
I'm sorry, Peter, for messing up the riddle. I screwed it up.
no, that's okay. No, but the point is well taken. But I mean, through storytelling, it's the only way we can be in someone else's
Right.
experience. Whether whatever the character is. I mean, that's sort of my issue with the identity politics being used as a way to divide us. I think is really distressing. But we live in just bizarre times
Right. And,
currently.
when it comes down to it, we're all just human beings
Yeah.
that have the same desires and loves and passions and everybody else. And when you get to that, that's when it really hits with the audience, because they can relate, and they can relate to anybody if you're given the chance.
Well, it's something that we talked about both moving here in '89. Moved here from Michigan in '89. I have a stepbrother who has Down syndrome. We didn't grow up together, but he at the time, my stepdad married my mother. Jonathan he struggled a lot, and you covered Down syndrome in the doc, which I really appreciate, because my stepbrother now lives by himself, has a job working for a law firm.
Nice.
He works in the mailroom, and he gets to work by himself. He takes the bus to downtown Detroit, works at this law firm. Everybody loves him. He's self-sufficient. He only has issues with money. He has issues managing money. But other than
So
that,
do I.
yeah, well, yeah. Oh gosh, I have issues
Guilty here,
dealing
too.
with money. But my stepbrother Jonathan, he's also he's a Special Olympics superstar.
Wow.
So he's been on the cover of the newspaper, and just it's an amazing athlete. He just happens to have Down syndrome, but it's very, very high functioning to be able to just have his own. Last time I went to Michigan, I was at his apartment in Royal Oak area, and it was great. He had Spider-Man posters all over. We bonded because we both like Spider-Man. He's a Marvel fan, but it's just so. I've been acutely aware, and it does of that from having a stepbrother. But I think any person, especially you mentioned 20% of the population. That's a high figure. That means you just have to know someone.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, we tried to cover every disability, and be very open to all the different sorts that have been covered in film and TV, and one of our sponsors is Easter Seals, because they cover a multitude of issues, and have been a great partner along with us to kind of bring this message to Hollywood, because Hollywood is so powerful in influencing the way the general public understands.
Yeah, you mentioned that the show Life Goes On.
Right.
And God, I'm spacing on the actor's name. Is it Corky?
Yeah, he played Corky.
Right. The character's name is Corky.
Uh-huh.
But they built that show around him.
Right.
I mean, and that really changed a lot. It changed people's perceptions about people with Down syndrome. It changed. It inspired people to say that people with Down syndrome can live just normal lives, like my stepbrother. So.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you included that segment.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like almost you could have done a whole entire documentary covering each disability in a sense.
Right.
But having it in a way, the doc is, I describe it as epic just because it covers cinema history from the beginning to now and the prominent parts and just you forget that there are so many. It's so prevalent, and especially I think what was interesting to see so many actors confess that, hey, you play someone with a disability, Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot, there's a good chance you'll be nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah, total Oscar bait.
So yeah, it is. It does after a while. Is there just, you don't cover this in the doc, but I wonder, is there any sort of resentment, a little bit of like, here are these accomplished actors that are, quote, fully capable or whatever, and portraying these roles with disability that then leads to their further success. I guess I would feel a little bit insulted.
Well, I think,
So could you just address that a little bit? I just feel that
I think the best way to is to kind of quote Jerry Jewell, who's an actress with a disability, and she said, acting is acting. You don't want to take that away from an actor. However, the thing that makes it unfair is that people with disabilities aren't given a chance to audition for regular roles.
Yes.
And so it has to be a two-way street, because if they can't get auditioned to regular roles, they won't rise in the ranks into bankability. So a lot of times, as a producer, you can't fund a project unless you have that name as the lead, right? And obviously, some of these portrayals, Jamie Foxx and Ray and Daniel Lewis in My Left Foot were amazing performances and deserved, the accolades that they got. But we need to have the ability to have people start in other roles and show off their talents so that they can then become a star themselves, and that then there's a job, pool for people to then they would want to come to because there's opportunity. Look at what we would have missed if Peter Dinklage didn't get the shots that he has gotten and continued on his career. We have talented actors in a multitude of, different situations. They should be given the opportunity as well. But for me, I'm all about the portrayal, because I think ultimately, if it's between not being able to fund it or have a character that is a positive portrayal, give me the character, because seeing somebody's better than not existing at all.
Yeah, and I can understand the appeal of an actor who wants to play a disabled person. I mean, that's like Jamie Foxx was talking about how he wore the makeup over his eyes so he couldn't see, and he had to live like that. And I know famously Ben Affleck did the same thing when he was playing Daredevil. The whole point of acting is to put yourself in somebody else's life. But I agree with you. It's all about the context. It's all about the performance. Are they, being respectful? Yeah,
Ben trained a lot with Tom Sullivan, who's blind, and also an actor, and used to be a host on Good Morning America and stuff. And so he really was interested. We have an outtake of that as well. But it's fascinating. I think that any good performance deserves recognition, but we just have to balance it. Same way behind the scenes. People aren't going into the business who have disabilities because they're being discouraged, for one thing, because there's no job opportunities. When I was first going to film school, the professor I met with said, do you know what your odds are as a female director? And hey, you use a wheelchair. Are you crazy? and he expected me to, because he'd done this with a lot of other students, like whatever he could pick on, he would say, and they would like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do something else. And I said, basically, screw you, I'm going to do it anyways. And he was like, oh good, here you go, you're in, and that was like a test that I passed because I was going to do it. Thankfully I'm hard-headed and passionate about the business. And what made this easier for me is that I know film history because I love it, and I love these old films. And I knew some of them, and as we started digging, we found ones that we hadn't seen that just were fascinating.
Well, it's interesting also because, and this is why I think I keep coming back to describing the film as epic, because there's no stone left unturned. I mean, there's you even cover in Tropic Thunder, Ben Stiller's character in that plays Simple Jack, kind of, calling out certain actors, maybe perhaps capitalizing on, playing a character with a disability in pursuit of, an Oscar-winning performance. Because there is certainly, and I can think of a few where the performance was not so great and didn't get Oscars. I'm thinking in particular of the movie with Gary Oldman, Tiptoes, where he plays a little person, and Peter Dinklage is actually in that movie. And it's ridiculous now, kind of when you look at it. He does sort of a Dorf Golf thing with his feet. No, I'm not joking.
So the Jim, the guy we were talking about earlier, has this outtake kind of about this. It's really funny. He goes, they can make an able actor disabled with CG and stuff. They never make a disabled actor able-bodied. He goes, why couldn't they just take my head? And I would win an Oscar, and it would be, look at how talented he is, even just his head.
I can think of one instance. It's that Christopher Reeves commercial that they had in the Super Bowl, where he stood up.
Yeah.
But I think that was criticized quite a bit.
I don't remember that. I was like
at the
10.
time, but just I mean, I really, really hope. One, I hope that the gold test becomes something that people take. I think I'd like if you would not mind if you could write an article for Film Threat, just like a short article, or say, but also when you get caught up in all this identity stuff, it's always a recurring conversation between Anthony and I, and I saw I think one of the best comments I saw in an interview with Taika Waititi, who is he is from New Zealand. He's the Maori tribe, so he's one of the indigenous peoples of New Zealand. And he was asked at a Q&A about being Maori and what does he think of himself as being a Maori director? And he goes, he doesn't think of himself as being a Maori. It's just a director.
Right.
Like with yourself, I think of you as a director. You're a director. You're a filmmaker. You're not a disabled filmmaker. You're not a female filmmaker. You're just a filmmaker. I really think that these labels. I don't agree with the way that they divide us. Yeah. I think that you deserve the same amount of respect, if not more, than, say, Michael Bay, especially Michael Bay. But what I'm saying is, you're a director, you're a director. That's right. It. That's okay. That's the role. That's your job on the crew. So we all have our lanes. Someone runs the sound, and someone does this, and you're the director. And so that's it. I feel like the
if everyone could think like you do, we'd be all set.
But I mean, this is it's one. I think it's important to have different voices in the mix, because it's just boring. Old white guys, we're good. We're good on that, right? So more diverse voices adds perspective that cannot be given by the old white dude, right? So I think that's important. But to then just there's only a kind of movie that you could do, right? You can only do female topics. Well, only. It would be limiting to you. Why would you want that?
When I first came to LA, when we first met, when we were in kindergarten, my agent, I was only getting offers for some disabled movie thing. And I was like, well, I don't. That's not what I'm about. I want to, my first film was an action film. My next one, low budget because that's all I could get. It would be nice to play in the Michael Bay realm one day, but for now, and I just do what interests me and keep going. But if everyone could think like you do, then we would be done. I noticed something interesting. It kind of dawned on me after years of like, I'd go to an industry event, and if it wasn't the DJ where they all know me, I noticed that at cocktail parties, you would go, small talk. I would go, hey, so what do you do? And they'd say, oh, I'm a writer, I'm on this, I'm on that. And I would wait, because usually you ask it back.
You ask, you're engaged in the conversation.
No one would ask it back to me. And finally, when it dawned on me, I was like, wait a minute. Because then Jeff would go, my husband, who's sitting right here, who people don't know because he's quiet.
Good thing he's staying quiet during the podcast. We're really glad about that.
Would go, oh, yeah, that's my, she's a director. And, he would, and I would realize, like, why aren't they asking it back to me? Because they assume I don't do anything.
Well, I would actually...
These are, bright, industry folks, too. So.
I would go one further. I think that this town is filled with self-involved assholes, but that's just only because I've been living here so often.
And you are one.
And, well, I try to be one for good, not evil. But no, just we live in a, selfie, what's selfie?
Selfie world.
Selfie world. We live in selfie world.
We should take a selfie before we go.
We will take a selfie before you leave. But
I'm terrible at taking selfies.
I was encouraged that the number of deaths from selfies. Have you heard this?
Oh yeah.
No.
It's a couple hundred people that they can identify. This was someone was trying to take a selfie in a dangerous situation and perished.
Off a cliff.
Fell off a cliff. There's all these situations of that. So selfies
are deadly.
They're deadly. Which
and the Darwin Award goes to.
Yeah.
Never a fan. Yeah, the Darwin Awards, which I love to read those every year. But no, look. This industry is just filled with self-involved people, right? So I would mark it up to don't take it personal. The same thing happens to me. No one cares, right? Like it's all about me and me and me and me. So let's talk more about me, right? Like that's this whole culture. But God, I love this film. I really want to make sure that people see it. It's a great documentary about cinema history, about what, and I feel that, inclusion is a part of our conversation now, and this needs to be a part of it. We
noticed that in a lot of the diversity, talk, even in Hollywood, it was the one thing that they didn't mention. And I was like, really? So I feel like we're kind of like the last civil rights movement of our time, and I'm hoping that the film will be a catalyst for like entering that discussion as well, and being included and making a difference. It's an uphill battle, and I really appreciate you guys because we don't have a marketing machine behind us. We are still independent in the little guy. Yes, we have a lot of Hollywood hitters because I couldn't stop myself. You talk about people want us to continue, and I'm like, well, the film's done, but they're like, well, maybe a web series or maybe this. I'm like, maybe, You
should. I do think you should. I feel like the doc is a spinoff to More. Because it really needs to be a spinoff to More because it's that good. I felt like, it felt here's what's weird. The movie felt short to me. It felt short. It's not short. I agree. It's not short. It just felt like this is not done. This conversation continues. So in the interest of the marketing machine, where can people find the movie? Where can they find you on social media? Please plug away.
CinemAbility, they share the same A, so CinemAbility.com. It's also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. It is available right now on iTunes and Amazon and Google Play and various outlets. The more that we can add every day. If you don't have it, then call your provider and say, hey, how come I don't have this? Or go to iTunes.
Just buy it on iTunes
Yeah,
or
it's
buy it on.
easy.
I buy stuff on Vudu. I don't know why that's mine.
I love Vudu.
It's just because I don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't think Voodoo has this yet.
it doesn't
That's
have you
the
guys.
Walmart.
Get on it,
I was
Vudu.
saying all right, forget Voodoo. But the thing is, it'll eventually be on.
I would hope. People always look for Netflix, but Netflix is in the distribution model, it comes last. So right now it's on all the other platforms until Netflix knocks on the door after hearing your podcast.
Yes.
And,
Well, however you see it, you need to see this documentary. I think it'll just blow your mind and just make you aware of what a big part disabilities have been in cinema history. And how whether portrayals on film, you really cover that's why I describe it as there's no other way to describe it than it's an epic documentary. It really is. And congratulations for making a doc that everyone really must see.
Well,
So
I appreciate that.
and thank you, Jenni, for taking the time out. I know I dealt with your publicist over This Is Good. So the publicist is doing a great job on that, but I feel like I guess I could have reached out to you just directly, right? But I'm so glad that the publicist knocked on the door. It's like, I know Jenni.
Yeah.
She's on the podcast. That's it. So I'm so happy and thank you so much for coming on the Film Threat podcast.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate meeting both of you, and I know you.
Yeah.
But, being here and you helping us out, because it really does take this ground, swell of word of mouth to get people to know about it, and together we can get it seen.
Well, I will say it's such a star-studded cast. You need to get
I couldn't
Ben
stop
Affleck's-
myself.
You could just tag them in your social posts. Get Ben Affleck to throw out a retweet, or some of the other, some of the Jamie Foxx or someone else. They're in it.
Yeah.
All you need is a retweet. Just a retweet to let people know it's out there.
We're working on it.
All right, Jenni, thank you so much. And go to the Film Threat website to look for the Gold Test.
Yeah.
The upcoming article, the Gold Test, is going to be up on Film Threat. Thank you, Jenni, for being on the show. And
Thank you.
And Jeff, thank you for being quiet.
It's very clear.
The media in Hollywood, everything we do, we set trends.
We can overcome social barriers.
There's no denying that people aren't influenced by what they see in media.
When you can see someone that has the same jersey that you have on, you root for that team.
There's virtually no people with disabilities present, in the kind of fabric of the entertainment world. And that wallpaper is really our collective social wallpaper, right? It's how we see ourselves.
Nobody with disability in the whole movie?
I think a lot of people are afraid of disability.
They only want to hear music that they know, that they're familiar with. And sometimes we ain't that song.
Difference is a part of life.
Everyone has to be represented.
If you want your film to look realistic, perhaps you should put someone with a disability in it.
If society got its ideas about people with disabilities from film and TV, they would think that we're either pathetic or super people.
I may speak differently, but it doesn't mean I'm different than you.
You just try to live your life and get through it like everyone else.
Do I think there's still discrimination in Hollywood? Yes.
Why not have it be a woman? Why not have it be a disabled character? Why not have a female director?
If you look at our society, we're still learning about everybody.
There is so much more that I believe that media can do to penetrate people's hearts, to change them, to inspire them to be all that they can be.